Hello, and welcome to the ELT Jam Productivity Toolkit webinar. In this session, we are going to be looking at some tips and strategies to help you work smarter, not harder. All of these tips, apps, and tools that we share are really intended to help you do more with the resources available to you, to get more done in a time and with the resources that you have available. Now, this was originally designed for sort of more of a business setting, more of a business audience, people working in companies or in product teams. But we thought that there was quite a lot here that was relevant to the education space. So hopefully there are some tips in here that do appeal and are relevant to teachers and education professionals. And we do hope that there are some things in here that you find useful and that you can apply and that benefit your productivity or help you work more productively. So let's get started. We're going to take a look at some tips and strategies and apps for managing your productivity in these 4 areas. So we're going to look at strategies for helping you manage your tasks, your workload, your time, and your communication. So starting with tasks, sort of an overarching strategy, I guess, that we talk about a lot when managing tasks is the idea of the second brain. Now, the second brain represents kind of an external repository of all of your tasks, notes, thoughts, agendas, all of those things that kind of arrive on your plate, as it were, from day to day. And it's kind of getting into the habit of taking those objects, those items and notes and tasks, and putting them somewhere else, putting them into some sort of system, some sort of, whether it's online or not, it's up to you, but some sort of system that you're able just to keep them and curate them externally. The idea here is that you aren't totally dependent upon your ability to retain all of that information and recall it when you need it. As we know, we're all occasionally it's liable to forget stuff or miss stuff or things drop through the cracks. But with the second brain idea, it means that you get into the habit of putting all of those things almost automatically out into an external sort of system for dealing with them. So one such second brain application that we use is Trello. Trello is a task management application. It's a web application and also has a really great mobile experience as well. And the basis behind Trello really is the movement and management of tickets. Every task is set as a ticket. These little sort of labels here, and you are able to put a great deal of information onto those tickets, which we'll look at shortly. But the idea is you move these tickets around from list to list. These larger blocks here are called the list. So for example, here we have a to-do list with all of my tasks that I am yet to do, the task I'm actually doing, and once I've done that, it's moved into the done list. So the idea here is that I move my tasks from left to right into the done pile. So that's a very, very simple way of using Trello. But like I say, there's quite a lot of information that you can include on a Trello ticket. So this is the back of a Trello ticket. Once I open one up and add a new task into it, there's a great deal of info that I can include here. At the top here, I can give the ticket a title or a description, something that shows up on the front of the ticket. I can add more descriptive information below that. So any notes or comments or anything like that are pertinent to the task. There are comments field here that I can use to communicate with other people who might be assigned to the same ticket or other people in my team. So once I've, for example, completed a task, or if I have a question about it, I can fire a comment at them from there. I can attach images, documents, videos, all sorts of stuff. At is the sort of the function for addressing somebody in my team. I can do all sorts of emoticons and create a ticket independently. So straight from this comment, I can make a ticket out of that comment. So it has the ability to kind of, if that commentary starts turning into more of a to-do list, I can start creating tickets for me to action out of that. I can assign that ticket to different members in my team, give it a label. I can choose whatever label structure I want. So you could do what we do, for example, which is to do it by priority, so low, middle, and high. You could label by topic, by subject, by process, whatever you want to do, however you want to categorize your tasks. Add a checklist to the ticket, however many checklists you want. A due date, like I say, attachments, a timer, which I'll talk about later on in the session, and you can move all of these around and copy the tickets as well, so you can really manipulate and curate the tickets in any way you want to. So a great deal of information, like I say, that you can put on the back of your ticket, which makes Trello a really versatile second brain for managing tasks. Here's one way that we've kind of interpreted Trello's functionality. As you saw in the first example, it was just a to-do, doing, and done list where we were moving things from left to right. But here we've taken that structure, and for our company, we use it. One of the uses of Trello is for our sales pipeline. So we've created the lists slightly differently. We've called this one leads, this one prospects, proposals, finalize, and won. And the idea, hopefully, ideally, is to move the tickets that are actually people, contacts in companies and so on, from leads into prospects and all the way through to one, where we've actually won a project and we are working with them. We like to put photos of the people on them to make it a bit more personal, but as you can imagine, on the back of those tickets there's a great deal of information about that contact, how we met them, the last point of contact we've had with them, a due date for the next time we need to reach out to them, and so on. So that's one way that we've used it. We've also used it for our entire company's processes. So here we have created lists for the paid work we're doing, the sales sort of drives that we're doing, any events that we're involved with, our marketing campaigns, our company admin, so more sort of C-suite stuff, the stuff that is to do with the working of the company, and all of those things that we have actually done. So moving again, not just from left to right, but from each list into the done column. And as you can see, each task has a person assigned to it. We've got a date. We've given it a color-coded label for how important it is. Here's red, I guess, here for high priority, yellow for medium. But that's, for us, is a snapshot of all of the things on our company's plate for that given week. This is just this week. So that's a great way for us to kind of to get a really good overview of all the things that are happening in the company. And you're also able to filter. So if I don't want to see everything, I can just see the tickets that are assigned to me, or I can just see the tickets that are high priority and assigned to me. So I just have a view of the most sort of urgent or important tasks that are on my desk. So a good way that this could be used in an education context could be each task could be a student, for example, so a student profile, and the lists could represent could be projects that you have set up that you are getting students to work through. It could be various different tasks, or it could be perhaps a stage at which those students are at in terms of project work or marking. So it could go from, they've completed phase 1 of that project, phase 2, phase 3, submitted it, and you're marking, and feedback given, whatever. You could sort of move the students through the Trello boards in that way. Or you could use it, of course, for your own sort of administrative tasks. So all the things on your desk, you could have a list corresponding to each one of your classes, for example, and put a ticket in for all of the different tasks that you have for that particular class. Or it could be different areas of your work. It could be sort of lesson planning, admin, and all the other things that you have going on at the same time. And tasks could be sorted by that. But there's a great deal you could do with Trello. It just takes a bit of sort of playing around, really, and as you can see, a really versatile way of dealing with all the tasks that you have on your plate at any given time. Another interesting application might be to set students up in teams and to have them using Trello themselves. So have them curating and creating their own tasks, and maybe adding you as a team member so you can see what they're doing and see when they've submitted work and so on. That might be another interesting way of using it. So Trello works really, really well with the Google Chrome web browser. So rather than having to every time you have a task arrive on your desk, or every time you find that there's something else you need to add, rather than going into Trello and opening the board up on your browser and creating a new ticket, you could do it straight from your web browser with this Chrome extension. So it just sits in your browser, you click on it, and you can add a ticket straight from here. You can add links to whatever site you happen to be looking at, or just make notes and add it to the correct board and the correct list within that board. So it saves you a bit of time. You just have a quick have to quickly put something onto your board to deal with later on. Now there are sort of other sort of second brains, other task management and project management platforms out there. Basecamp is another one that we use. The way that we use this in conjunction with Trello is that Trello tends to capture all of our higher level tasks. As you saw in that weekly board, those are all the priorities for the company for that week, fairly high level priorities. And the Basecamp platform is what we use for kind of coordinating the activities behind delivering on those priorities. So this is where our teams coordinate, where tasks and documents get sort of collaborated on, where we can track and assign tasks in more detail and so on. But that works really well for us. There's also Asana, which is a very similar platform, slight differences, but again, allows you to set up teams, assign tasks, track tasks, add tags, all of those sorts of things, but a really good way of tracking all of the things that are going on. Again, a great way of getting your students working together, setting up different teams of students, assigning work to those teams, tracking how much they've done, adding sort of reminders, getting notifications when things have been completed, and so on. Ultimately, the idea behind this is to get tasks out of your brain into a system that you are able to access and curate, rather than carrying everything around yourself. So once you've got all of those tasks into your second brain, whatever platform or process it is you are using, the next task, I guess, is around managing that workload. How do you sift and sort through all of those tasks and tickets that you have entered? How do you determine or decide which ones to work on and when and so on? Because it can become quite overwhelming, and it's very easy to get lost in the quagmire of just endless tasks. So one really good strategy is the Eisenhower Matrix, which is a way of categorizing tasks attributed to the man himself. And the Eisenhower Matrix is this. It distinguishes between important tasks and urgent tasks. And then based on that differentiation, you're able to sort through and prioritize your time and effort and respond accordingly. So an urgent task is a task that requires your attention straight away. So that might be something like a sort of a phone call, an email, a text message, something that's kind of incoming that you have to or requires your attention and you need to respond to. And it does get you much more of a kind of responsive sort of frame of mind, I guess. Whereas important tasks are tasks that contribute to the longer term goals of your business or your institution or your personal goals. They are more sort of value adding and value building, and are much more longer term, so contributing to the mission or vision of your organization or personal missions. So the idea is when you're looking at your tasks, once you've got them into your second brain, is to categorize them by this matrix. So if a task is identified as being important and urgent, so that is it contributes to the longer term goals of either yourself or your company or your institution or organization, and it's also urgent, it needs your attention straight away, then that is something you need to do right now. That should be priority, top of your list. If, however, it's important, longer term value, goal orientated, but it's not necessarily urgent and it doesn't need your attention right now, then that is something you can decide to schedule and do it at a different time. So in your second brain system, in your task management system, you can change the date, pick a time or date to actually get back to that task and go back to prioritizing the important and urgent tasks. If a task it could be identified as being not important, but it is urgent. So it does need attention straight away, but doesn't really contribute to the longer term goals of the business or your personal goals. Then is that something that you could delegate? Is there somebody in your institution, in your classroom, or somebody that you know could take that task on for you? Potentially, there are people outside of your networks, like virtual assistants, that could do that, do tasks for you, and we'll look at some options shortly. But the idea here is that that is something that you should get off your plate, leaving you to look at and work towards or work with the more important tasks. And if a task could be identified as being not important and not urgent, then the question here is whether you should just delete it. Why is it on your desk in the first place? What's the value of you having that or doing that task? Eliminate it or delete it is the sort of suggestion there. But of course, there will be exceptions to that rule. But as a guiding principle, if you can identify tasks as falling in that category, then you have to really question why is it on your task list in the first place. So that's a very good way of kind of categorizing tasks that are in your second brain. But behind that is kind of the assumption when we're talking about important tasks, specifically those ones that contribute to the longer term of the business or longer term goals of the institution or your own sort of personal goals. Behind that is the assumption that you have a really clear idea of what success does look like. So what, for example, would success look like for you by the end of the day? And we do this a lot in our company. We start thinking about, if I can achieve one thing today to make this day a success, what would it be? And then you say, okay, based on that, what would success look like for the week, for the month, for the term, and for the year? So that all of your activities are always building towards that sort of success, that mission that you have identified. And again, that helps you to really start thinking about the tasks on your list in terms of importance versus urgency. So something that we found really useful is just thinking about what do I really want to achieve? What is the one thing I want to achieve? And again, an interesting exercise, I imagine, if that was turned over to your students in the classroom. What would success in their eyes look like for the day or for the week or for the term? And perhaps get them maybe using the Eisenhower Matrix. I don't know if that's something that they might find useful, especially if they're perhaps more involved in independent sort of study tasks and so on. But being able to distinguish themselves between important and urgent tasks. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago about delegating tasks to somebody else, whether that's somebody in your institution, somebody in your classroom, or perhaps a virtual assistant. And Fancy Hands is a service that does offer a team of US-based virtual assistants. Basically, I mean, they are real people, but they're virtual in as much as they don't work for your company, that you can delegate tasks to them as and when you need to, and they will, for a brief time, do whatever you sort of really need them to do. The model behind Fancy Hands is that for about $30 a month, or for $30, you get 5 requests, and each request represents 20 minutes of work. So, like I say, you can really get them to do a great deal for you to get tasks off your desk. I've used them for things like helping me look into and book travel arrangements, helping me do some research for a blog post. So, for example, could you go and have a look for the top 5 trending stories, web articles, or blog posts about Pokemon Go, which I duly did. They created a wonderful spreadsheet for me with Twitter links and quotes and all the rest of it. Or could you convert some sort of quotes into sort of an Excel spreadsheet? So sort of financial quote we've got through for the company. I've asked them to put it into spreadsheets and so on. So a load of different stuff that you can ask them to do. And then over the course of me using the Fancy Hands service, I have saved, allegedly, nearly 8 hours of time that I would have otherwise have been spending on those tasks. So potentially a useful sort of productivity hack for teachers and educators. I mean, would Fancy Hands be a useful service for looking at sort of researching articles, most up-to-date articles on a particular topic, perhaps doing some sort type of n-gram research on language on the web, how words and phrases are used to help you inform your teaching and so on, maybe some picture research, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's got really as many uses as you can imagine, but a really useful service that I have found. And going back to Trello, our second brain platform, our task management system, Fancy Hands plugs into Trello really nicely. If you remember, I said when you create a ticket in Trello, you can assign the ticket to members in your team. And here you can have Fancy Hands as a team member. So as you are creating tickets and putting them into Trello, you can assign them straight out to a Fancy Hands assistant, and they can take care of it for you. So kind of joining the dots, it's working on your browser, you click on your plugin and create a ticket, and from that ticket you can assign it straight to Fancy Hands and get it from your brain into your second brain and onto somebody else's desk really quickly and efficiently. There's also Fiverr. Fiverr is kind of a marketplace that where people are selling all sorts of services. You can get things from people helping you with your WordPress site, people doing sort of coding, design, translation services, advertising services. People will do sort of short video clips to help you promote your products, all for $5, or all starting at $5. And another great place potentially to pick up some great sort of assistance. We've used these for transcription, giving them sort of interviews or things like that we have done as audio files, and we get transcriptions done back and really accurately done and quickly done as well. So another sort of service for taking some tasks off your desk and getting them done quickly and cost effectively. Story points is a technique that we have kind of appropriated from the software development industry. It's used a great deal in Scrum teams for managing workload, and it's done by assigning a points value to a particular task. So when we're talking about managing workload, we've thought about the Eisenhower Matrix and how we can start sort of distinguishing between important tasks and urgent tasks. And the story points technique is a way of assigning a value to those tasks. So we can work out over the course of a week, for example, how many points we have we built up, how many points we've got to work through, so we can get a sense of what our capacity is looking like. Do we have a load of points, a really high points value on our desks that is unlikely to get done, or do we have quite a low points value across all of our tasks that suggests that we have extra capacity that we could perhaps assign to different things? And the way we use this is, well, first of all, the way it's used in Scrum development teams in the software sort of industries and companies is to assign a points value based on the complexity and the amount of effort surrounding a particular task. So, for example, if they're developing a feature for a digital product, they'll work out how much time, how complicated it is, how many unknowns there are, and will assign a points value to that task accordingly. We've kind of used it in a bit more of a simplified way, and we assign points to a task based on just how much time we feel it's going to require. So we have 1 point value is equal to half a day's effort. So 2 points would be a full day's effort, which means that each team member we feel can kind of carry around 10 points in a 5-day working week, and that helps us to really chart, as I say, the capacity, which people in our team are carrying a ton of points, which means that things might not get done, and which people in our team are carrying fewer points that might be able to help out, and we can distribute points across our team in that way. As you're probably spotting, there is a trend here. It keeps linking back to Trello, but there is a really good story points app called Scrum for Trello. Extension in Google Chrome called Scrum for Trello, and this means that you can assign story points directly on your Trello cards. So once you've captured them, you've assigned them, you can work out a points value for each of those tasks, add them to your tickets, and those will add up across the lists. And as you see, going back to our huge company-wide sort of Trello board here, we can see that there are values on each of the tickets, and those add up at the top of the list, and they create a running total at the top of the board. So we can see across the company how many tickets we've shifted and how many tickets we need to do, and the values of those tickets. So just a really good way, I think, of tracking how much work you're kind of moving, I guess. And a good way of spotting when people are perhaps over capacity. And again, this might have applications for your learners as well, if you're able to assign a points value to a particular task. So if there's a writing project, for example, that you think is quite complicated, that might take a while, that might have a higher points value attributed to it. And sort of the shorter, quicker turnaround ones would have a lower story points value. And you can perhaps see how many points each student is shifting, how many points they are completing. And when a student is perhaps carrying too few points and perhaps needs a bit more work to kind of see them through or extend them, that sort of thing. Now, something I struggle with, especially when we're thinking about workload, is kind of overwhelm occasionally when you are managing a huge number of tasks. And I know that people in the education and teaching industry are very familiar with that. Often it's the case where you're using your second brain really effectively. You've got a really good task management system in place, but it's still, you've got a ton of tasks sat there waiting for your attention, and it can be quite difficult sometimes to stay focused and to kind of work out or keep your brain, I guess, clear enough to focus on one task without kind of stressing out about everything else that needs to be done. Now, an app that I found works really nicely for that is Taco app. It's a web app, and it pulls in tasks from all sorts of different platforms. So Basecamp, which we looked at, and Asana, I mentioned earlier, or Gmail, all sorts of applications, some others here. And it kind of consolidates them into one list, and it allows you to just choose one of those tasks and put it in the center of your screen. So drag and drop the tasks that you want to focus on now. So that's the one thing I'm looking at right now. And when that's done, I can pull out the menu of all of my tasks and just choose the next one that I want to focus on for the next period, or however long that is. But a nice way of kind of creating a little bit of, I guess, mental space and helping you focus when that workload starts to creep up a little bit, or perhaps starting to feel like it's slightly overwhelming. Okay, so moving on from workload management to time management, and we were kind of thinking about that just now when we were looking at that Taco app, about how to sort of kind of stay focused and to use that time in a more focused way. A strategy that we found when we at ELT Jam started looking at our time management was that we found it really difficult to really work out where our time was going. So we started using Toggle, which is another web app, and it's a time tracker, and it allows you to, every time you start a new task, you enter a description of that task, you assign it to a client or a project, or however you want to structure it, and you click start, and the timer starts and stop when you're done on that task. And over the course of a day, weeks, and months, you get a really, really good picture of what you are actually doing with your time. It takes a little bit of discipline to begin with, but it becomes sort of second nature after a while. But we found it's really difficult to make any decisions about time management if you don't know what you're doing with your time. And Toggle is a really good way of getting that information. And it gives you a great breakdown of how time is being spent across your projects, across your team members, and all sorts of things. And if you're a freelancer, it's a really good way of checking your billable versus non-billable time. So really good reporting, and really helps you kind of expose some of those kind of time drains. So for us, for example, we realized that we were spending an inordinate amount of time on emails. So we decided to put some strategies into effect that would help us kind of trim that right down. And again, that's something we can talk about in a minute. But so Toggle would be a really interesting application for students, I think, that they could you could get them to kind of get into the habit of tracking their time. There's kind of study behaviors, maybe. How long do they spend on particular tasks? How long do they spend sort of reading? How long do they spend doing homework? Whatever you want to do. And you can set them up as teams, and you can kind of monitor and check to see how much time they're spent on particular activities. And again, for yourselves, I mean, just as teaching or education professionals, using Toggle is a really good way of tracking and getting sort of really good data on how much time you're actually spending doing things, how much time are you actually spending traveling to work to the school or institution, how much time do you spend actually in meetings as opposed to in the classroom, how much time do you spend preparing, all sorts of things. A really good way of kind of getting information on your behaviour and sort of work behaviours to see if there are ways that you feel you could improve, adapt, change, or whatever. Just good information to respond to. And as ever, there is a really good toggle button extension for Google Chrome. So this puts a toggle button right in the middle. It will integrate a toggle button into all sorts of platforms and products, so that you don't need to have toggle always open on your browser or fire up toggle on your browser every time you have to do something. You can just hit the button right there when you are about to start a task in whatever application you are doing that task in. So, for example, as you may remember, this is the back of the Trello ticket we talked about earlier on, with all the information we can enter, and the little toggle timer sits right there. So when I'm working through my tickets, I've identified this as a high urgency, high importance task. I can start my timer directly from my Trello ticket, and that will pull through into toggle automatically and start timing the time it takes me to finish that particular task. Similarly, it can sit right in your Google Calendar events. So here I've opened up the event that's happening, and I can start my timer here and keep track of the time it takes me to complete that particular event or appointment. Just a really convenient way of making sure that everything you're doing is kind of it's contributing to your timer data. Again, helping you make decisions or learn about your behavior. The Pomodoro technique is a time management technique that helps you to stay focused on tasks and also helps you to keep kind of fresh as well. It's often the case when plowing through a list of tasks that you are just kind of tied. I find this often you're just tied to your desk and you don't really move for an hour or two, and it can get quite sort of stifling and a bit not the most productive way of working, I guess, or not the most sort of not conducive to a productive afternoon. The Pomodoro technique involves the use of a timer. Oh, skipped ahead. Involves the use of a timer. You set the timer for 25 minutes. You could use your phone for that. That's a great way of doing it. 25 minutes timer, and for those 25 minutes, you are focused on one task. You nominate a task to work on, and you only work on that one particular task. You don't get distracted. You don't flip between tasks. You don't open your email. You focus on one particular thing. When the timer goes, you take a 5-minute break. Step away from the desk, have a cup of tea, walk around, chat to your colleagues, whatever it is that isn't working. And then after 5 minutes, you go back and do another 25. And it could be the same task, or if you've completed that one, you choose another one. And after 4 of those, of 25 minutes work, 5-minute break, you take a 25 or 30-minute break. So a much longer one. Stretch your legs, go outside, get some fresh air, have a little walk around, and then repeat that kind of 5 Pomodoro, that 5-point process throughout your day. A really good way of, like I say, making sure you stay focused and that you actually get time away from your desk to keep fresh and productive. An interesting exercise would be to use this with students, I think, getting them using this in the classroom, again, if they're kind of self-study orientated, or maybe using it for your teaching practices in the classroom. I wonder if it would have an impact if through the course of your lesson time with students, every time that, after 25 minutes, there was a 5-minute kind of break, refresh, fresh air, open the window, glass of water, reset, back for another 25. Be interesting to see if that had an impact on the productivity and engagement of students. And you've guessed it, there is a great application for this. It's using the same toggle button extension that I talked about just now, and in the settings of that toggle button on Google Chrome, there is a Pomodoro timer. So when you press your toggle button to activate the timer in whatever task you are doing, you can get it to sound or to go off after 25 minutes. So it's all kind of integrated in a really nice, slick way. Open a task, hit the timer, and it will give me 25 minutes and then tell me when to step away and take a 5-minute break. So the final section here is managing communication. For us, as I mentioned earlier, once we started tracking our time, we realized that there was a huge drain when it came to emails. We're spending hours and hours of our time just going through our inboxes. So we started using this technique called Inbox Zero. Now, Inbox Zero is a strategy developed by a guy called Merlin Mann. And the zero in Inbox Zero refers not to the number of emails in your inbox, but to the amount of time that your brain should be spending in your inbox processing things. And it's really based around the kind of shift from considering considering your inbox as being a to-do list to thinking of it more of a list of tasks that need to be curated, and there's a really sort of cast iron strategy for curating it. So it's not going in there and just ploughing through email after email. It's having a really effective way of dealing with those emails in a way that means you're spending as little time in there as possible, and your brain is again engaged with more of the important value-adding activities that you really need to work on. So when you are engaging with your inbox, and going back to the Pomodoro technique just now, you might find that you have a particular time in your day to look at emails, and that is something that Merlin Mann does recommend. And he actually suggests that you close down your email for any other time of day. You don't have your browser open all the time, or you don't have your phone notifications on, but you actually choose a particular time of day or a couple of times in your day to go into your inbox and to go through this process. So when you are in that sort of email slot in your day, you should be asking yourself 2 questions. The first question when you open an email is this relevant? Is this something for me? And the second question is, do I have time to deal with this email right now? And based on the outcome of those 2 questions, the answer to those 2 questions, there are only 4 things that you should do. So if you ask yourself, is this relevant to me? And the answer is no, then delete it or archive it so it's not gone forever, but just get it out of the inbox. If it's not relevant to you or doesn't require any input or anything from you, then you can straight away archive it. If it is relevant to you, but you don't have time to deal with it, as in it takes more than 2 minutes to respond to, then you can defer it. So choose a time, put it into your second brain, maybe using that Trello and Gmail. I haven't shared that with you yet, I've just realised, but there is a great application for Trello and Gmail where you can get it out of your inbox into your second brain and assign a time to get back to it, or you can delegate it. If it's not relevant to you, you could find, or sorry, if it is relevant to you, but it does take time to refer to, is there somebody else that you can ask to deal with it for you, or somebody else who can help respond to it. And if it is relevant and doesn't take much time to deal with, then deal with it straight away. So if it takes under 2 minutes to get a response back, then do it there and then and get it out of your inbox. And the idea behind all of those 4 actions is you are doing something with your emails, and you are kind of clearing your way through them in a way that doesn't mean you're just working through it like a to-do list. Now, as I said just now, before actually showing you this, there is a great way of deferring those emails out of your inbox. There's a really good plugin for Trello and Gmail where you can create tickets straight from your emails. So you can open up the plugin, you can choose the board, choose the lists on that board, give it a title, and just get it out of your inbox into your second brain to deal with at a later time. So here's an example of me using that in another view, using an email from my colleague Berta regarding a workshop we're running, and I've assigned it to a company admin list in our weekly priorities board in Trello. Now, Slack is a fantastic communication tool that has really changed how we, and in thousands of companies actually, communicate internally and with clients and customers and contacts and so on. Its kind of intention was to replace email altogether, and to replace it with quicker, lighter, kind of more responsive, more like instant messaging format of communicating with your colleagues. So rather than kind of doing an email where you're CCing all of your colleagues about a particular question or an update, whatever it is, you can create different groups and send a message just to that particular group. Or they're called channels, I guess. You've got a general channel here, and you've got channels for all the different kind of processes and teams within the company. So just send it to that channel. And because it's more like an instant messaging user experience, messages are quicker, people respond to them, I find, a little bit more quicker, and you're not kind of bogged down in that email crafting that often sort of comes around when you're dealing with a more sort of formal email experience. So a really good way of using this, like I say, is setting up teams. So this might be something you want to do with your learners. So you could have, again, different classes could have different Slack channels where you are providing them with kind of input. You can add attachments, links, all sorts of media to Slack channels. And they of course can upload their work to you or share links with you. You can comment, add reactions to things that they're doing, and that sort of thing. So a really good way of communicating with students, a really good way of communicating with colleagues as well, in a way that doesn't mean you're kind of being CC'd on a ton of emails. You're just communicating to the people that need to hear it in a very quick, light way. There are a ton of integrations for Slack. So many things that you can get Slack or other sort of integrations to do for you in your Slack channels that make life easier in a number of ways, or just really help to make you work productively. It can be really informative. One example of that is a meeting bot that we have in our Slack channel. And this is an integration, kind of a chatbot integration that helps me schedule meetings. So I just tell the chatbot who I want to have a meeting with and when and for how long, and that bot will go and look at both of our calendars and will choose the most suitable time. So I'm not spending all of my time back and forth. When are you free? I'm free at 5 p.m. Whatever it is, I can just get the bot to do it in one kind of request, and they will find the most suitable time for me to meet. But there are tons of applications and integrations for Slack. Things that pull in sort of dictionary information, news feeds, weather information, pictures, anything that you find, anything that you think would help you, or any information you need, you can pretty much assume that there's going to be an integration for that. So again, a really powerful way of communicating, but also of kind of getting information that you need into the right teams and so on. Daily stand-ups. This is a meeting format that, again, is kind of appropriated from agile software development teams, and it's kind of part of the Scrum methodology. The daily stand-up format is at the beginning of every day, at the beginning of the workday, there is a 5 or 10 minute meeting that is done standing up, as it suggests, and it means that the meeting is done quickly. People aren't kind of inclined to go off piste or off track. They talk about the order of the day, and it's done quickly so people can get back to what they actually need to do. And in the course of that daily stand-up, there are 3 questions that you need to ask and answer. First one, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And so what are your priorities? Going back to the idea of what the success looked like today. If you had to do one thing, what is your focus? And do you have any blockers? Are there any obstacles in the way of you achieving that, or any reason why you don't think you're going to manage that today? And in a daily stand-up situation, the team leader is kind of responsible for listening to that and doing what they can to remove those blockers for their team members where they can. And it's also a really good way of the team getting a good understanding of what everybody else around them is doing, and to contribute to helping them achieve that particular task for the day. A really interesting use of this might be in the classroom, where at the beginning of the lesson, getting your students to answer these questions, doing a really quick 5-minute stand-up. What are you doing today? What did you do yesterday? How was it? any problems that came out of that? Or is there anything stopping you achieving your objectives for today? And that third question might really throw up some interesting sort of teaching opportunities or learning opportunities, especially if the blockers do turn out to be kind of language ones. They don't have the language to complete a certain task, or they don't have the resources for a certain task. It might start helping kind of expose some opportunities there. But also a really interesting thing to do in the staff room, rather than having sort of lengthy team meetings. 5-minute stand-up at the start of every day might be quite a useful way of getting a sense of what's on everyone's plates, what the focus is, and what people have sort of preventing them from achieving that, so that whoever's in charge is able to respond and remove those blockers as best they can. Elmo is another meeting strategy that we love to share. We use this internally, and we share this with our clients. Elmo stands for enough, let's move on. And it means that it's kind of a device, as it were, that anybody is free to use whenever there is a meeting in place. And it's used whenever somebody feels that the topic or that the kind of the topic or the course of the meeting has kind of gone off track a little bit. We're kind of no longer talking about the agenda or what the objectives of the meeting originally are, and people are kind of talking off topic. And the idea here is that anyone around that table has the right to say Elmo, which means let's stop, let's get back on track and deal with what the business is in hand. But it just helps meetings to stay productive. It means that anybody is able to monitor whether they feel the meeting is becoming less productive, and also kind of backs up some key assumptions about meetings. The overall question that should be asked at the beginning or when a meeting is being scheduled is, why are we here? Why is this meeting being held? What are the objectives? What does success look like? What do the outcomes need to be? What decisions are we trying to make? Is everybody here who needs to be here? Or does everybody need to be here that is here? So it just helps make that meeting time, which can be quite costly if you count up the number of people that do attend meetings, make sure that meeting time is used productively. And again, with Elmo and a good sense of what you need to get out of that meeting, that can be done in a really productive way. Potentially, imagine using Elmo in a classroom or in speaking tasks, for example. I don't know, it might be having interesting applications there. Definitely, I imagine in staff meetings, but just a good way of kind of keeping on track and giving that ability to everybody involved to kind of, like I say, monitor when things are getting less productive. And that brings us to the end of the Productivity Toolkit. I hope there was something in there that you found quite useful, that you felt that you wanted to try or apply in your working or teaching environment. But yes, thanks very much for listening and enjoy.